Saw the headline on today's Oklahoman. Joining us now with some more definition of that headline for the nation's capital is our man in Washington, Chris Castile. And Chris, the Army today, we know it had to reduce the active duty ranks by 40,000 and the civilian workforce by 17,000. Today they released specific base-by-base changes. What did we learn today?
Well, we learned that the Army base, the Army post in southwestern Oklahoma, Fort Sill, is one of the very few that not only is not going to lose positions, but is actually going to gain positions. Fort Sill will gain 219 positions. They're getting a couple of artillery battalions added, and that is just actually that is just remarkable in context of what was announced today. I mean, you had bases like in Texas. Some of our listeners may know Fort Hood and Killeen, Texas. They're getting cut 3,350 positions there. Fort Bliss down in El Paso, 1,200 positions. Up in Kansas, Fort Riley, 615. Huge base in Georgia, Fort Benning, Georgia, where a lot of basic training is done, 3,500. There's a base in Alaska that's being cut 2,600. So you're right. Well, the Army has known for months that they had to cut 40,000 people, get from 490,000 troops down to 450,000 troops. What they announced today was how they're going to go about it.
And of course, when those number of troops are reduced at the various bases, the impact is on the local economy. And Chris, the other big concern, at least from the politician's standpoint, is about the country's national security with such a large personnel reduction.
That's absolutely right, Dave. I should have said earlier that these cuts will be made over the next 2 years, 2.5 years. They hope to get them done by the end of fiscal year 2017. But you're absolutely right now, and that's kind of where the Oklahoma guys were, and a lot of the Republican congressmen were today on this. Is like, you know, the Oklahoma guys, Senator Jim Inhofe, Representative Tom Cole, you know, hey, we're relieved, we're grateful for Sill's not being cut, but we're worried about this, about, you know, what they call the degradation of the Army and the military. You know, these cuts, I think the Army just a few years ago was up at 570,000. Now it'll be down to 450. That's a level it has not been at for a very, very long time. And, the military, I mean, obviously they're a part of the administration now, are saying, 450 we can handle. Anything below that, we can't guarantee national security at the level that we're at. So, but at the same time, some of these lawmakers, they make choices. They're the ones who write these bills for the defense, for the Pentagon. They're the ones who make defense policy. And, at the same time, the Pentagon's we want base closures to save money. We want to get rid of these airplanes to save money. At Tinker Air Force Base, we want to get rid of some AWACS to save money. And they block, and Congress blocks all those things because of their parochial concerns. So, something's got to give within a limited budget, and personnel are obviously your most expensive. Your biggest cost is always going to be personnel.
We're chatting with Chris Castile from the Oklahoman's Washington, D.C. Bureau about the Army releasing some of the data on the base-by-base closures today. Chris, you outlined in a story that you have posted right now on newsok.com, Fort Sill's been around since 1869, but it would actually be quite expensive to shut this base down.
It really is, and it goes back to the U.S. government's war on Indians. That's why that base existed in the first place. It has obviously evolved since then, but it's an artillery training base. It has been for decades. That's where they fire off cannons, huge shells. And they've got ranges out there that are full of unexploded ordnance, shells that were just duds. And in order to shut a base down under the law that Congress operates under for base closures, is the military has to prepare it to turn over to a community. You don't just shut the thing down and put a big fence around it. You've got to clean up that base and give that land to the community for other uses, because of the economic impact. So that would be an incredibly expensive operation to clean up, all that unexploded ordnance and the exploded ordnance out there. Just the environmental issues out at Fort. Plus, where are you going to move it to? It's not like there's a lot of communities that are probably, saying, hey, come, blow off cannons in our backyard. I mean, Fort Bliss down in El Paso has an absolute ton of land, but still, it's just an incredibly expensive venture. So covered, I think, every public. I have covered every public base closure round since the early 1990s, and I've never seen Fort Sill. I've never seen serious consideration given to Fort Sill.
You mentioned that economic impact in your story. You say the Army estimates Fort Sill's economic impact on the area $1.8 billion last year, and that counts towards the pay towards retirees and the contracts. Chris, as always, we appreciate the information and the context.
All right, Dave, glad to do it.
All right, more coverage from Chris Castile on this story and other doings in Washington online at newsok.com and in the Oklahoman.